Homeschool time is precious. It's time to do some subjects with all of your kids together. Hi, I'm Jenny with Kids Learning for Life, and I have a third grader, a first grader, and a toddler. The toddler doesn't do school yet though. Even though my oldest two are very close in age, they are 2 grades apart, but they're technically less than a year and a half apart. We do 2 subjects independently because they are at different stages in both of them. These subjects are math and like phonics, language arts type stuff. What has made my homeschool time a lot more efficient is combining lessons for the 2 of them for different subjects. And this is something I recommend for anyone who has multiple kids or just not enough time to do every little thing individually. And if you're here because you want to hear more about AmblesideOnline, I will get to more on that in just a little bit. The first subject that my kids do together is science. I have never been shy about the fact that science is not my favorite subject to teach. It's really hard for me to incorporate into everyday life, especially if I'm using an actual curriculum, which I stopped doing. So science is something where I just don't want to have to put a ton of my willpower into it. Having them do science lessons together has really been a saving grace for me in my homeschool. This has been working for us basically since the beginning of when we started homeschooling. I always had them doing lessons together, and it seems to work great. We are known to do the occasional mystery science lesson over the past year, and we'll be continuing doing that. I just make sure that I choose a whole like video lesson series thing based on specific interests and also my kids' abilities, because if you've ever been on mystery science, they have all sorts of lessons in for different grades in different topics, and I just try to choose something that both of my kids could learn from and potentially be interested in. Outside of curriculum, we learn a lot of science naturally. Living on property, we raise all sorts of animals, like we have a bunny, we have goats and chickens, so my kids do take an active role in caring for all of these different animals. In the time that we have lived rurally, we have witnessed births, deaths, and everything in between. So really, science is something I don't worry about anymore because, quite frankly, we witness natural science on a daily basis. The other subject that we have always done together is history. We used the very popular history curriculum, Story of the World, for a while. And even though my kids were in separate grades and different ages, I had them doing the lessons together. And just a side note, Story of the World is a really great curriculum choice if you do have multiple kids of different ages that you want to combine into the same lessons. Now we use more living books for history based on the AmblesideOnline reading list and schedule, but we are still doing all of these history readings all together. It always seems like a little bit of a red flag to me when I see history curriculums marketed for individual grades. I don't really see why this subject has to be split up. I can understand like high schoolers being separated from like lower elementary, but for the most part, it's all just kind of like reading stories and learning from the past together. So I don't think that curriculums really need to be splitting it up by grade, and I've been enjoying doing history lessons all together. I think we all learn a lot together based on what we're learning in history. Okay, let's talk about AmblesideOnline. So this might be a little bit complicated, but I have a first and a third grader, but together this year we are doing AmblesideOnline Year 2. The reason we did this is because I know preemptively that I am not going to be able to fit in all of their different readings if they were in separate years. Also, with their ability levels, this just seems to make sense. My third grader didn't really start reading until recently. My first grader is basically at the same level as her, so it just made sense to split the difference and do Year 2. So that being said, we do all of our AmblesideOnline readings together. The main subjects that we use AmblesideOnline for are history and literature. For history this year, we are doing readings in various books, but the ones for Year 2 are Our Island Story, This Country of Ours, and A Child's History of the World. Our Island Story covers the history of England, which then bleeds into American history, which is covered by This Country of Ours, and then A Child's History of the World is more of a global perspective. These readings are all mixed together in the schedule to create like this big picture type of idea, which I really enjoy, and the schedule doesn't really compress the readings too close together, so I feel like there's enough time to let each lesson breathe and give you time to get through each chapter. And with Ambleside Online, for literature, this year we are reading Understood Betsy, The Wind in the Willows, and The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood. Both of my girls, even though they're in different grades and they have very different personalities, they equally love Understood Betsy. And I just know that once we get into The Wind in the Willows and Robin Hood, they will also love those too. Even though we're doing these as read alouds, so they're not forced to read all of this on their own, I do find that these books really do split the difference for them. I think for both of them, they're able to enjoy and understand everything that's going on, so I don't feel like anything is too challenging for one of them or not challenging enough for the other. I also wanted to mention that another thing we do together is Shakespeare. Honestly, Shakespeare is such a kind of collaborative community experience that I don't know how I would even begin to separate my kids for this, and honestly, I don't think that's even really in anyone's best interest. So we do Shakespeare plays together. We start out by reading the retelling from Charles and Mary Lamb's Tales from Shakespeare book. So we read the retelling of the play that I choose, and then I have them do some sort of narration, and I try to make these narrations really fun. So whether it's performing it, acting it out, or creating an illustration or a book of illustrations to demonstrate what happened in the play or what stood out to them. And then of course the last step is actually watching a performance of the play, which is always my favorite part. And I have yet to be let down by anything Shakespeare does. I think I'm enjoying it personally, but also my kids are getting so much out of studying Shakespeare. We also do kind of some structured handicraft time together almost on a daily basis. But I do want to add a footnote here. Even though we're all doing handicrafts together in the same room at the same time, my kids are almost never doing the same handicraft at the same ability level at any given time. For example, my oldest daughter is really enjoying crocheting. I also love crocheting, so I taught both of them how, but my oldest daughter has really taken to it like a fish in water. And then my younger daughter likes to be a little more creative, and I don't really know if there's a name for this kind of handicraft, but she loves like making drawings, cutting them out, gluing them on other pieces of paper, like almost like a collage, but not quite that intricate. Just kind of making her own types of graphics or illustrations. That's really the thing that she's been gravitating towards, and I'm going to continue encouraging both of them in any of their handicraft type interests. So that's just an example of how we do handicrafts together, but kind of individually. While my youngest daughter, who just turned 3, is not doing school yet, nor do I want her to be doing school yet, I do try to incorporate her in as many of these things as possible. Like when we have a Shakespeare play on, when we're watching it on the iPad, obviously she's gonna sit there and watch it, not the whole thing, and she's probably not gonna understand as much as we are, but she's a part of it. And also like when we're doing school at the table or doing like history or whatever together, she'll sit there and kind of like, you know, draw or write or kind of try to participate. She also loves to participate in narrations, which is kind of fun. But once she does actually reach school age, I'm gonna have to figure out how to bridge that gap. She's like a good 4 years younger than my second daughter, so we'll cross that bridge when we get there. If scheduling and maximizing your homeschool time as much as possible is interesting to you, you might want to check out my video on how I homeschool for just an hour a day. Put a link right over here. Be sure to check that one out. You can't miss it. See you next time, and happy homeschooling.